Hello, and welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comic books and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Todd A., and with me is...
Oh, sorry, I just talked right over you there. Taylor Trask, also here. Sorry, Todd. I didn't know if you were going to do it with me or not, but you did, so we should...
I know, but and the reason I did that is because on our last episode, I screwed that up. So now I'm throwing it back at you. How's that?
Wow.
How are them apples?
Bright
I like
and
the the wow, I don't even know where I was going with that. Sometimes when we record more than one show in a day, the banter becomes pretty kooky.
It does, but that's okay. That's quite all right.
I mean, all that to say though, like, I love that we're back to talking comic books. As I said in the last episode, we're hitting redo on the whole year, and you're sitting down with a podcast where we talk about comic books. That's cool.
That's right.
It was nice to get back to reading comic books over these past couple weeks. Like, just saying like, hey, that's the thing.
Well, and so, feeling like it's not, because I mentioned before in another episode or two, but like it kind of started to feel like obligatory last year at some point. And now I'm sort of back to being like more of a sense of discovery again. Like that's one of the reasons I went to
I agree.
Muse Comics yesterday, just because I was like, man, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it again, and I ended up getting some really cool stuff. One of the books which I spoke on our last episode. So,
and I had a very similar experience, which I talked about a couple episodes ago, which was I randomly followed this artist on Instagram. Didn't even quite know that the artist was a like published, mainstream comic books artist, Sweeney Boo. And near the end of the year, she posted about a book she had written and drawn called Eat and Love Yourself. And I think this was in late December. And I was just like, perfect. There was artwork from it in her Instagram post. And I just hopped over to it, purchased the book on Comixology, and had that same kind of joy of like, oh, I've discovered something that I didn't know about that would have probably passed me by, but for that, Instagram post. So that's what I'm talking about today.
Heck yeah.
And we've already done one this month where you talked about the Dune. What do we want to call that? Like it
graphic
is an
novel.
adaptation.
Yeah, just the Dune,
Sure.
Dune graphic novel.
Yeah, that's one of those properties that's funny because you feel like there are already so many adaptations out there, but I really don't think there are. It's not like they've been remaking the this is a graphic novel.
I forgot to say on that episode, because there are movies, there are TV shows, there are TV adaptations, there are sort of inspired by adaptations. There actually is, there hasn't been rather a graphic novel treatment of Dune in full, but there was a sort of, I don't even know what you call it. It was kind of a graphic novel. It was like a floppy graphic novel adaptation of the David Lynch movie that came out in the 80s, which I ended up picking up at an amazing, in the basement of a comic shop in Salida, Colorado, of all places. And I got a bunch of cool stuff there. I'll post it up on Instagram. But yeah, there's a few things. But
that's totally what I picture.
Yeah.
Like the one where it's got it's basically a photograph from the movie of Sting walking out in the desert or something, but they've sort of hired a painter to kind of smear the photograph or something.
Yeah.
Because I had the Blade Runner version of that. So my introduction to Blade Runner was I had done a comics trade with someone, and that person, because we were very young, like we're probably like 12 years old, and neither of us knew, what the heck Blade Runner was. And he obviously made the savvy deal and got some like sweet Transformers comic books from me or something. And I got stuck with this like old ass Blade Runner on the, with the sell of like, no, it's a classic or something. And so I'd read this thing like, what in the crap is this? It wasn't until I was like 18 or something and saw the movie and was like, oh wow, I actually know this story.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm sure this feels like that Dune is very much like the proper comics adaptation of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could not be more degrees away from that with my pick. And I think I needed to step back into comics with something like this because it is, it can feel daunting with like when you look at superhero books or even like Image titles that whether I followed them or just heard hype on them, it's like, oh, there's so much there to get into. And so this was nice to pick up something that was not fantasy, not superhero, not sci-fi, just a pretty intimate personal story, although there is a bit of magic that I'll discuss in it, but it definitely felt like more of like an indie comic. But it is on Boom Box, and I don't know if that's sort of Boom Studios like even more indie label or something, but yeah, it is Boom.
Does it have the exclamation point behind the word boom?
Sure does. Yeah. And this is a label we've talked about a lot, and like as kind of an up and coming, like, hey, we're seeing more and more stuff on Boom that we really like.
Yeah. Boom, I didn't mention it last time. Boom is crushing it right now in the same way Image was circa 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And the Image is still doing fine, but Boom is really, man, between their adaptations and their original work, they're on a roll right now creatively.
Cool. Yeah. And this is, and it's great because we also did an episode where you did a ton of research into Dune, and I went into this with my normal amount of like no research. Sometimes I do want to look up biographical details and historical details to try to, know exactly what this is like. But sometimes I really like going in fresh and not being distracted by all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So this has got to be a like fully creator owned work. It's all in one. Like it is a graphic novel in that sense of like it's done.
Did it come out as single issues at first?
I don't even know, but I honestly I wonder if that's what Boom Box has to do with, because I wonder if maybe it just wasn't single issues. Mm-hmm. And given how I'd probably been following Sweeney Boo for a bit on Instagram and only heard about this at the end of the year, I think I would imagine that the hype was not drawn out, I wasn't seeing posts about this as it was being published. It was just afterwards, like, hey, this is a cool thing that came out this year. So, I would bet that it was a kind of a one shot, published all together. And it's, written and drawn by Sweeney Boo, published by Boombox. And I'm stalling as I flip over. I had the colorist right in front of me and then flipped the page and lost it. Joanna Lafuente. But yeah, it is, as I said, a very personal kind of feeling story. And there's really no way I want to do my best not to spoil it, because it is a really small self-contained story. And I want to do my best to talk about like the themes and the art and what it is like to read this, so that if that interests a listener, they go out and get it for themselves. Because it's not, because of its personal nature, it's not like there's a spoiler, like a big plot twist or anything that I could spoil. I could only talk too much and kind of give you everything that's in the book, and I don't want to do that. So it is very cute, I think, is probably the first word to use when discussing the art in it. Can
I well, before you even jump in, can I just one quick observation? When I look at the cover of this thing that has the yellow title "Eat and Love Yourself," I'm getting a bit of America Andolfo's Unnatural vibe from this. Yeah. Is that just the cover, or does that sort of permeate the art throughout?
I'm glad you set that up, because you're not wrong. And I had written down that this, and obviously like I've called out these artists before, this is as very much like a America Andolfo vibe to it, or like Babs Tarr. Both Mirka and Babs do a lot more like pin-up kind of art. And this is definitely not that. It leans more into the indie comics. The human beings in it have real proportions, I guess is the best way to say it.
Okay.
But it does have that style that's somewhere in between like a manga and like an animation style, where the colors are really intense and features are exaggerated in a cute way, big eyes. Like the lead character in this is named Mindy, and she has these gigantic round glasses on. So all of those things are, things that like Mirka Andolfo does a ton of, like the big manga eyes and exaggerated features like glasses or something. So it feels a lot like that, but right off the bat, it's I do want to mention the color palette before I jump into that, which is there's a good variety of color in it, but it definitely hovers around these like cool blues and purples and like a sea green. That's what Mindy's hair color is. Okay. And it's like her skin almost has a purple tone to it, and her clothes are often blue and stuff. And there's great contrast with like a big red coat or, you know, a sort of a magenta background or something like that makes the foreground characters pop out. But it's just so, I'm using this word intentionally, delicious looking. Like this looks like a pack of wild berry Skittles. You know?
Oh, ooh, that's like a good sommelier note there.
Right. Well, that's where I got my my tasting degree is in Skittles. But I wanted to say that right off the bat, like, you know, this positions itself. I mean, first of all, there's the title, but you know, it is not a book about, you know, with like pinup shapes and stuff like that. It is very much about like real figures. And it starts with this big panel of Mindy where she is in colors, although they are all sort of in the blue cool palette. And then there's this magenta crowd around her. It really just like highlights her, focuses her, like this camera shot of just her sitting alone at the bar with a Coke, you know? And it is the story of a girl who struggles with her own body image and struggles with bulimia and just turning to food as a comfort source, and also has like body dysmorphia. But what is, you know, so it sets it up where she's out at a club, you know, she's got a friend who really loves her, who's trying to drag her out onto the dance floor, but she's self-conscious, and very much like a slice of life drama. Later that night, she takes the friend home to her house because the friend is drunk, and Mindy realizes she doesn't have any cat food, so she runs down to the store to get cat food and then snack food for herself. And, you know, just as she's checking out, sees this organic chocolate bar that you know, promises to like help with your life, sort of like one of those things at the register that's, you know, almost seems like a nutrient bar or something like that, you know, but you know it's still an impulse buy. And then becomes this repeating motif of her eating one little square of this chocolate bar and basically time traveling back to her younger self and learning all about the triggers in her life and the messages she received from her parents and friends about her body and how she's going to deal with that.
Now, when you say time travel, is it like Quantum Leap, where she is her younger self, but her mind goes back, or does she physically go back to like visit her younger self?
Great question. And right down the middle. So because that is one of the great visual things about it. So as like they've established this color palette right from that first scene of Mindy and all the blues and like the magenta crowd around her, when she travels back, she is this sort of magenta pink outline of herself, observing her younger self in full color. Okay. So it's just this really simple way of communicating, like there's sort of a ghost Mindy observing a young Mindy in her life. And it's like so I say right down the middle, but I think honestly, like the touchstone for this is Christmas Carol, because this is Scrooge going back and not being able to communicate with his, you know, past self.
Yeah, I love that comparison.
He's, or, you know, she is there telling her younger self, like, don't eat this, don't keep eating this, or like, you know, and like she's punishing her younger self for with all the same messages that she received at that age. And so this motif of the chocolate bar, you know, it kind of comes along, like she flashes back and she's like, what the hell was that? She goes to work, you know, something at work kind of triggers her, and she'll binge and purge at work to kind of like, you know, address that emotional anxiety. And then later that day she'll think, okay, well, let me try that chocolate bar again. Maybe that wasn't a fluke, and time travel once again, you know, or at least revisit her past self. So what I found, like, what was so interesting to me about this, and what like really kept me reading, because, you know, that on itself is just that's an understandable story. That's like a thing you don't need any subtext to tell that. It's very straightforward. But what I thought was so engaging was this idea that eating the chocolate bar and then having this kind of, what do I want to call it, like spiritual or mystical travel back to observe her younger self was basically an analog for psychological work where you gently explore past traumas in order to reprocess them and sort of file them in a new place in your brain. And it occurred to me, like, as she's going through this, like, oh, this is like real work that you do in psychotherapy. And so this became like this great little, analog or metaphor for that there's going to be like a magical component to it. And it's even interesting where there's a scene where her younger self goes to the psychiatrist, and that psychiatrist tells her all these things that are going on with her. This is body dysmorphia. People don't see you the way you see yourself. And she's, it's like, here's her older self in ghost form, observing her younger self receiving that message, but really not internalizing it and processing it because she's still in that trauma thing of like her parents complaining about her gaining weight, or, saying she eats too fast or she eats too slow or she's not paying attention, and, she needs to work out, and like all those messages she's getting. So it just, it was just like a really cool way to communicate this without being too heavy handed, I guess, and taking you through the like TikTok of it all, because you're seeing like vignettes of what happened. Here's the past vignette and here's the present vignette of how it still comes up. And then ultimately how she's going to process this. And because of that motif of like every few pages, you see the chocolate bar with another square eaten, there's kind of a countdown. When she gets to that last one, it's kind of like, oh, you better have your realization now. You better process all this because you only have one more.
Now, does it give any indication that this was just one magic chocolate bar? Maybe I misunderstood in the beginning. Does the store sell these? Like anybody can just have one and have this sort of psychedelic journey, or does it ever explained what the chocolate bar's origin is?
So I know I'm just being dense about this because I cannot think of the perfect pop culture example of this, but I know this has happened before where it's like the magic thing, food, whatever, shows up just this once and you don't see it again, but it looks like it belongs there. What am I thinking of where that's like a famous thing? But that's definitely what it seems like. This chocolate bar is called Eat and Love Yourself. And on the back it says, try Eat and Love Yourself. The chocolate will change your life. And so, it's kind of a thing where she's never seen it before and no one else seems to have it. And she only buys the one. And, that's all we know of it.
Now, this whole time my biggest question is, how did you come in contact with this book? Like what was the hook for you that made you go, I'm going to pick this up?
Purely Sweeney Boo's post. And liking Sweeney Boo's art previously and thinking like, oh, this is kind of that style of comic art that I like, that's kind of slice of life but still has that sort of fun, cute manga style to it. And it's so weird that I would say manga because I don't think any modern manga reader would look at this and go like, oh yeah, that's what it is. But to me, that's sort of one of the reference points.
Yeah.
But that was it. And so that to me was like the fun of finding this thing and then really enjoying the story and just, finding myself going through it and also knowing like it is a one and done thing, so many comics that we read are part of a bigger series or like one part of an arc, and it's hard for me to get it. It was hard for me to sort of like daunting to think of like stepping into some other big series. And, where are the baby steps to this? They give me a little bit of magic and a little bit of real life and, don't hit me over the head with it, but get me into it. So,
well, it's beautiful. Your Skittles comparison is really apt. I've been kind of going through different little sort of test pages here and there. So yeah, I loved that comparison. I would say too, the panels are very rich. Like everything seems like everything from like the hairs of like the friend she's talking to, hanging in the hair, like in front of her eyes and things like that. Just every panel kind of has a great feel in. And she's also doing this effect where she's taking kind of some of the lens flares and like and nudging them or fudging them a bit, so it's got a more of a blurry, like when she's in the club, for example, and you can see the lights can have a blurry effect. So there's a bit of a bit of like sort of digital manipulation here in addition to just the drawing. And then even like it's interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like Sweeney Boo, this is like her first work. Like I don't see any other entries for her on Amazon or anywhere else. So if she's got other work, I'd love to see it, but I don't has she done anything else, do you know, prior to this?
Well, that's a great call out to everything else here. So this was actually kickstarted.
Great.
And she had done in the bio at the back, I did that much research at least. She had done a cover and a short story for Rat Queens in 2016. And in the Instagram post where she mentioned this coming out in 2020, she also mentioned that she had done, like there were other comics she had worked on. And I think one was a Captain Marvel and one was a Ms. Marvel. But they were both Marvel titles. So, this was like kickstarted, fully financed, picked up by Boom Studios for distribution, but purely like creator owned. And that leads me into this other comment I definitely wanted to make, which is one of the other things I thought was so enjoyable about this was how well the dialogue works and feels real. And, like it feels current, but it's not overly reliant on cliches and stuff, or pop culture to communicate things, and especially the texting. And texting, I think, is so hard to get right in a comic because it already looks kind of like old school in a comic when you draw a text box,
Yeah.
So to do it on a phone is kind of like, oh, this just, how do you differentiate this from a comic speech bubble? And also, how do you make the dialogue sort of work in that when it's two people texting back and forth? And I'm just, I'm always impressed when like a artist can write really well, because sometimes I find that they're not giving enough details, or sometimes they're giving way too many details, and they're not always finding the right, like, cinematic shot for the scene in order to tell the story enough and then fill it in with dialogue or vice versa, And I just thought this did such a good job of that. So I really enjoyed it, and it was like an easy sit down to read. I actually ended up taking a couple of sittings to read it. And not because I needed to put it down, but something else came up and I put it down and just found it's like, oh, it's really easy to get back into. And, this is not high art literature or whatever, but it's a very current story that puts things in a really understandable, context, and just, really should hopefully connect with people.
I would say too, just based on what I'm seeing through sampling some of the art, if you are a Scotty Young fan, I think you'll like this too. She has some of his, it shares a little of his aesthetic in terms of the way she draws. I mean, obviously it's very unique to her as well, but it almost kind of feels like Scotty Young and Mirka Andolfo like kind of merge a bit here. Something unique.
I like that. I like that comparison for sure. And he was one of the people I was thinking of where, and you're going to have to fill me in on what the title is that I'm about to forget. Oh, Middle West, where Middle West, you really like the writing on Middle West, which he is not illustrating. And I thought I Hate Fairyland. Sometimes I was disappointed in the writing there.
Yeah.
No offense, Scotty. Like I thought it was such a tremendous work, but
it's weird to have a book.
It was so wild.
Well, it's weird to have a book like Middle West where Scotty Young is such a talented damn artist. And by the way, check out his Instagram if you want to see some just cool stuff on a regular basis. He will do he'll do a Scotty Young version of Magneto and a Scotty Young version of like the Ninja Turtles, and it's just like it's such a distinct style, but like so frustrating to see him write but not illustrate a book. Although the illustrations on Middle West are beautiful. So, I'll hopefully talk about that in an upcoming episode myself. But I love everything about this. The fact that it was a Kickstarter project, the fact that it's her first work. It feels like she didn't leave anything on the table. Like it feels like, just from what I'm perusing here, that like You know, it's like, if I'm going to do this and this might be the only thing I get to do, then I'm going to put it all, like, I mean, no panel looks like it was just sort of, you know, lazily left or sort of you know, rushed through, I should say.
Right. And I think it's got enough of the clever things, like the single image of the chocolate bar being sort of the chapter break.
Yeah.
You know, enough design elements that way to keep you interested in the sort of like art part of it. I mean, not that the rest of the art is great too, but there is, you know, there's obviously like a concept to this and like a pacing and a countdown basically of like I said, like when this story has to end, when she finishes this chocolate bar. So, there was, you know, it's like just the right amount. Like, it's so much better to write a short song and nail it than to try to put everything you want to say into a long song or album, you know. And this is just a great pop song in that way.
Format, I don't know if you mentioned at the outset.
I did pick it up digitally, and I did wonder at times, although when I read that about the Kickstarter, I wonder if it was sort of intentioned to be digital, or if it was kind of designed for digital and then retroactively made print. I don't know, and I guess I just shouldn't even guess at it.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't. I guess what I can say is it wouldn't surprise me if this was really like, you know, a concept for like, hey, we're going to make a PDF no matter what, and hopefully the Kickstarter gets us some printed versions, you know, because it feels very snappy on digital. You know, I love the guided view. But even when I zoom out to look at the pages and the panels, it's different enough. It is comic booky enough that it is not just like square to square to square to square, you know? So I think whatever your preference is, pick it up that way. But, you know, if you're going to meet Sweeney Boo at a convention in the next year or so, definitely get the print autographed.
It's a great point. And she might even have some limited edition hardcover prints too. So if you know that's coming up and you like it, or if you like it and you want to get the serious souvenir, maybe hold on your money for that too. I always forget that when these artists do cons, they often have like really good versions of their stuff. So keep that in mind.
I'll add to that because that's a great thing to bring up because Kickstarters do too. Oh. And we talked in an episode back in the pandemic about like how do you I think it's in our Comic-Con episode about how do you support local artists. And I said like, oh, I'm doing a ton of like Patreon and Kickstarter stuff and sort of hoping that is my contribution. Like of the money I would normally spend at a convention, let me do it, you know, in these ways. And I would say reach out to creators who have done a Kickstarter and see if they have extra copies lying around. I just recently reached out to a game designer after the Kickstarter ended. And he said, yeah, I actually have 2 or 3 more sets available. I just don't have any of the like manufactured boxes, like the packaging for it. So if you don't mind me just sending you this all in like a Ziploc bag, I'll sell you the game. And so I have this rad game called Spire's End that I just put in a normal like card box and it looks amazing.
And just to clarify one more time, Sweeney Boo wrote, illustrated, and then is it her publishing label, or did she get picked up by Image or something as a republish?
Picked up by Boom.
By Boom.
Yeah.
I'm
so
sorry,
I read
Boombox.
The Boom. Yeah, and it did say in the bio as I just refreshed my memory, Boom Studios. So yeah, confirmed. This is Boom. I'm curious what Boombox is. We'll fill that in on another show.
Did she start her Kickstarter like with the original batch? I wonder, and this is more from a collector's standpoint. Like if you want the OG first edition, like was that her Kickstarter, or was it always towards the end of having Boom pick it up and put it out officially?
Oh no. I think at least from what I understand from from that back bio is that Boom picked it up afterwards. Okay. And so I do see that if you go to Kickstarter, there is a different cover for it. Or at least it looks that way. Maybe this was just a concept. And it does look like it was also published or at least the Kickstarter ended in 2019. It looks like right at the end of it though. So yeah, you know, she was probably fulfilling it early in the year and then Boom picked it up.
Got it. I bring this up because it's worth noting, like if you go back to I'll give a great example. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the very first printing, Eastman and Laird just did it not at a Kinko's, but something similar. So when you say like first Xerox edition, when you do first edition of Ninja Turtles, like there's the first edition under the publisher, which is still still picks up a nice price at auction or just as a collector, but it's those self-printed versions that really get top dollar. So from a collector standpoint, I always try to figure out like what's the OG version, the OG publishing version. So if you really want to be a completist, maybe go track down some of those Kickstarter copies too physically, or if you bought it digitally, maybe and you liked it, try that so you can really have a great copy on your shelf. Because I'm guessing her Kickstarter versions were hardcover probably.
It looks like it.
Yeah,
I mean, there were digital ones, and I'm finding out as I scroll through the Kickstarter that Mirka Andolfo was a guest artist who contributed like prints or bookmarks or something like that. So now I'm super jealous that I didn't contribute to this and get like a Mirka print along with the hard copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I mean, my feeling about we've covered it in many episodes about stuff in the house, and it's not that this doesn't rise to the level of worthiness, but I would just say feel fine about yourself if you only pick up the digital version of this. Like support that artist any way you can. This is one that maybe if I find her at a Comic-Con, I would totally pick up a copy because I love the art. But it's not one that I'm going to add to my shelf until I have some unique opportunity like that. Fair enough.
Sweeney Boo, Eat and Love Yourself. Another great pick here on the Panelism Podcast, Todd. I like the picks. What I love about, if I haven't said it before, what I love about our tastes in tandem is that I don't think there's seldom, if ever, a book that both of us have read at the same time and liked, and we come to the table with like the same suggestion. There's always like, for every left turn I make, you go another left turn. So there's the diversity of picks, I think, is one of my favorite aspects about what we do here.
Well, and to add to that, and it's probably worth reiterating at the beginning of 2021, is that one of the things we consciously think about all the time is we are not trying to be another podcast that keeps up with what is happening in comic books right now.
Yeah.
Not that we're trying to dig into bins, but if we find something that's amazing in like an old bin, we will talk about it. If we find something new and amazing, we will talk about it. We just want to talk about stuff we like that is not necessarily mainstream, but not excluding mainstream, So to me, these two books that we've started out the year with are total opposite ends of the spectrum, but also fit nicely into that like kind of off-kilter suggestion,
Yeah.
We're not telling you to go read the new Justice League or whatever.
Yeah, which, I mean, there's plenty of people who do that, and they do that fine.
Exactly.
And it's not, frankly, it's just not something I'm interested in keeping up with, because then it starts to feel obligatory again. Because, I mean, God help us, if I have to read something like X of Swords again, and feel like I have to do it, I might stop reading comics. So it's, what I like is that, with episodes like this, you should be able to walk into a really great local comic shop, or frankly, any of the shops in Portland for that matter, and know where to start. Because you walk in, especially if it's a good shop, it's a little overwhelming. You're like, I don't even know where to start. Everything I'm looking at looks interesting. What the hell do I even focus on?
Yeah.
You can almost become paralyzed by choice. So at least with our suggestions, you can walk in and go, okay, I've heard them talk about this, and you can have a kind of at least a head start at building your bag, your shopping bag. So I like that aspect of it. If you like this, go ahead. I was gonna close this out. Go on.
I was gonna ask you to preview what your next book is, because you do know what's coming.
I do, next. And I'm not gonna change it because I've been wanting to talk about it for many months now. And it is. I think it was going to be my January pick, but I think it's a more fitting pick for February. And frankly, I want a little more time to delve into it, because it's one of those books that, for me specifically, hits me at a deep level. Like, just it resonates with me for a variety of reasons, and I just want to make sure I'm attuned to that. But it's called The World of Adina by Moebius. Jean Giraud himself. So he wrote it and illustrated it. It's pretty hefty. It was when they started publishing Moebius's back catalog, this was the first book they put out. And just lovely. So we'll be talking about that in depth, and I'll really get into my my love of Moebius. And we haven't really talked much about him in terms of outside of just a little kind of background banter, but I'm going to be doing that. And at some point this year too, just if you like Moebius, I'm going to be talking about the Inkle finally as well, which is another.
Cool.
That's a bit more complicated than Adina, but I'm very excited. That is a book that Adina is a book I've been really wanting to talk about, and now I have the time. So,
and I don't know exactly what I'm going to pick, but I do feel like we have truly pressed, reboot, redo, restart, whatever you want to say. I have cleared the cache, and I now look at what I have in Comixology and what's on my shelf with like totally fresh eyes.
That's awesome.
And feel excited to read any of them. So I'm not exactly sure what I'll talk about in February, but actually this episode may be in February already, but I don't know what I'll talk about next, but I got a lot of choices. So
yeah, great. Well, stay tuned. We'll be posting on Instagram. We're at panelism.inc. That's panelism.ink on Instagram. It's also our website URL, panelism.inc. And pardon me, you can listen to all of our back catalog. We talk about a lot of books, a lot of other things. We still to this day, Todd, every time I look at our analytics, I'm surprised by what people are finding. Like a lot of people are coming into those early Todd and Taylor episodes and then either catching up or kind of picking their favorites through. So go back to that back catalog. A lot of that is still really fun, really interesting, evergreen. Hopefully for the most part, you get to hear different iterations of the show along the way as we started with the Todd and Taylor show, then Coffee and Comics, and then ultimately Panelism. So yeah, go back, check it out. Pay attention on Instagram. A lot more of that to come this year. I'm kind of feeling the even though Instagram's a bit different than when we started, I'm kind of feeling that again, and as well as all of our social media. So we'll be posting a lot.
And ideally, what we hope to do is post a preview of this, so like, hey, what we've read in case you want to pick it up a couple days before the episode actually comes out. That's kind of hard to do because you might in 1 week we don't want to post too many times about the same book because we also want to open it up to conversation when we do post it.
Yeah.
So, but look out for those.
Yeah, look out for them. Well, it's been fun. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next episode, Todd.
I will see you then, or I will see you at another time.